Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because, well, today we're hopping into a nostalgia fueled time machine right through the heart of Indian pop culture. We're going to explore Ambi Paramaswaran's incredibly fascinating book, Nawabs, Nudes, Noodles India Through 50 Years of Advertising. If you've ever wondered how the commercials you grew up watching actually shape the way you think, you are in exactly the right place.
To kick things off, I want to ask you a quick question. What do Hamara Bajaj, Jo Biwi Se Kare Pyar, and Bole Mere Lips all have in common? I'm willing to bet that just hearing those phrases triggered an instant, catchy tune right in your head, didn't it? These aren't just clever little rhymes, they're deeply ingrained cultural memories. They literally managed to capture the exact mood of the entire nation at the time they aired.
And really, that brings us to the core premise of our explainer today. We need to start looking at advertising as a societal mirror. You know, it's not just about corporate commerce or, say, selling soap. It's a live reflection of a nation's evolving identity, its language, its values. Throughout this whole journey, we're going to ping pong between two connected ideas, what we bought and who we were. Because, as you'll see, the two are just inextricably linked. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. Ads as time capsules more than just selling products. To really understand this time capsule idea, we just need to look at the super catchy title of the book itself. Nawabs represents the era of really elite aspirations. Think back to the days before mass television, right? You had the Nawab of Pataudi modeling for high-end shootings aimed directly at an affluent, English-speaking demographic. Then you have Nudes, which highlights these moments of shifting sensibilities and serious boundary pushing, like that highly controversial Tufts Shoes campaign that featured a python and models totally in the buff. And finally, Noodles. This represents changing domestic life, that moment when Nestle brought this totally alien instant food to Indian mothers, sparking a 2-minute revolution that forever altered the Indian kitchen. Now, it is absolutely crucial that we maintain an objective lens as we analyze all this. Not everyone views this retrospective as some profound sociological study, you know? In fact, an India Today review pointed out that some critics felt the book is merely a collection of random factoids adding up to nothing. So we're here to just impartially look at the facts. You can decide for yourself if these campaigns represent deep societal shifts or if they're just clever, disconnected marketing tricks. Moving on to Section 2, Finding the Indian Voice, the Language of Ads.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive transformation that happened. Back in the 1960s and 70s, the ad industry was kind of this elite bubble. Campaigns were crafted by theatre actors from St. Stephen's or St. Xavier's, writing highly polished English copy on Remington typewriters, all for a wealthy, westernized audience. But from the 1980s onwards, as the consumer base totally exploded, we saw a massive shift. Agencies started bringing in talent from smaller towns. Hardcore Hindi writers entered the scene, which eventually gave birth to the massive phenomenon of Hinglish, that famous everyday mix of Hindi and English that gave us iconic lines like Bole Mere Lips, I love Uncle Chips.
Actually, this entire language revolution is beautifully captured in a great insider anecdote about the legendary copywriter Kamlesh Pandey. His colleagues used to joke, "This Kamlesh fellow thinks in Hindi, writes in English." And honestly, that exact shift in the creative process, literally thinking in the language of the masses, is what finally allowed brands to connect with the true heartland of India. All right, Section 3, the evolution of women, from the kitchen to the boardroom. Just take a look at this stark juxtaposition from the exact same brand. In 1982, the absolute ultimate symbol of a husband's love was him buying his domestic wife a slightly more expensive prestige pressure cooker. You know, Jo Biwi Se Sachmuch Karte Pyar. Well, fast forward over 30 years to 2014, and Prestige releases a print ad with the exact same tagline. But this time, the husband, played by Abhishek Bachchan, is the one cooking for his wife, Aishwarya Rai. It's just a perfect visual representation of how advertising captures the evolution of new age relationships. Let's see how this builds with another really fascinating brand study, the Santoor woman. The core campaign concept, you know, the surprise mummy gimmick, stayed exactly the same, but the character herself evolved with the times. She went from just being a pretty woman at a wedding to an active mom playing cricket, to a successful television anchor, and eventually a multifaceted singer. By consistently adapting the woman's aspirations to match real-world progress, Santoor quietly built a massive market share and famously even overtook Lux in 2018. Up next, Section 4, Growing Up on Screen, Media, Audiences, and Attention. Think about how our viewing habits completely transformed. In the 1960s, print and radio pretty much ruled everything. Then came the 1980s and the absolute total monopoly of Doordarshan. I mean, when the whole country gathered to watch Ramayana, an ad had a captive audience. It just became part of our collective memory. But then, in the 90s, with Z, Star, and Sony, media fragmentation really began. Fast forward to today, in the digital 2020s, and marketers are battling what is essentially a 4-second goldfish attention span. It's crazy to think ads used to run for 2 solid years, and now they're replaced every single month.
So as screens multiplied everywhere, how did brands actually break through all that increasing clutter? Well, one highly effective method was the child strategy. Just think about these heavy hitters, the absolute undeniable self-assurance of the I am a Complan boy, I am a Complan girl ads. Or Sundrop cooking oil. It looked exactly like its competitors until they introduced a cartwheeling kid, and boom, it became the largest selling oil in years. And of course, the legendary runaway Dara kid, who is lured back home just at the mere mention of hot jalebis. Kids just instantly connected with families and literally changed consumer purchasing behavior.
Which leads us to Section 5, the client agency trust behind the scenes of iconic ads. Now, what's really interesting about this is a sort of golden rule in the industry. Every client gets the advertising he or she deserves. Ambi Palamaswaran points out something crucial here. If a client micromanages and totally chews up their creative agency, they end up getting lousy, super safe ads. But if a client actually trusts the creative process, they get brilliant, culture-defining work. At the end of the day, it all comes down to trust. And honestly, there is literally no better story of trust than the famous Dara Jalebi crisis. So, a few months after that beloved Runaway Kid ad aired, a newspaper reported that actual kids were sitting at bus stands threatening to run away from home because their moms weren't making them jalebis. The agency totally panicked and went straight to Dr. Kareen, the legendary head of Amol and Dara. His response? Keep running the ad. It's working. That kind of fearless, unwavering backing from a client is exactly how iconic advertising actually survives.
Finally, let's look at Section 6, Reflecting and Shaping Society, the Ultimate Impact.
So, the crucial point really boils down to this big debate. Does advertising actually create social change, or is it merely riding the wave of existing social trends just to move product? As Ambi notes, an ad's primary job is, for sure, to sell. But occasionally, brands step up. They use their massive platforms to advocate for a better, more inclusive society. Let's look at a few modern examples where brands really push those boundaries. Vicks VapoRub released a deeply moving ad featuring a transgender mother adopting a child, which was actually based on the real-life story of Gauri Salant. Ariel's Share the Load campaign came out and directly challenged the ingrained assumption of who should be doing domestic chores. And Tanishq Jory ran a beautifully progressive campaign centered entirely around a woman's remarriage. These aren't just selling items, right? They are actively telling the nuanced, socially responsible stories of a new, evolving India. Which brings us to our final thought. As we stand here today in this highly fragmented digital age where our attention spans have shrunk to just 4 seconds, what will the ads of tomorrow reflect about who we are today? Will we remember them decades from now the same way we do the jingles of the 80s, or will they just vanish instantly into the feed? I'll leave you to ponder that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this journey helped you grasp the fascinating history of Indian consumerism. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.